Hi, everybody. So, we are now going into the second part of the story. So, you've heard about all the yuck, all the bad, irresponsible behavior regarding finances. And now we're moving into the cleanup story. So, in this part of the story, you'll hear about all the measures that I took over the course of the years to clear up my credit, clear up my debt, and different ways where I personally believe the universe rises to meet you when you start doing the right thing and you get very clear about what you need. So, I just wanted to give you that really quick intro to this part of the story. If you're this kind of person like I was, if you wind up going to bed thinking about finances and waking up thinking about finances and your debt is like all consuming, there is so much help out there for you. All you need to do is start Googling debt and self help, and a bunch of resources are going to present themselves. I mentioned Gerald Mundis's book, which is a favorite book of mine. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into it, and I'll see you in the story. So the first thing I did is I started asking around for help. Like, what do I do to help me get out of debt? And there's a lot of self-help that's available for you out there that will help give you clarity. I read this book by Gerald Mundis, and the title is Get Out of Debt, Stay Out of Debt, and Live Prosperously. And that book was a lifesaver for me. I also met a lot of people who had walked this path before me that were able to help me. And one of the first things I needed to start doing, and you're going to hear a lot of those credit gurus out there like Dave Ramsey and all those others, they do talk about a lot of similar tools, but the one that really was something that I even do now that is imperative is tracking my spending. And so for the first like month to 3 months, I just tracked every single thing I spent and I put it in a spreadsheet, every single thing. So I needed to have a clear idea of where my money was going because I wouldn't know where my money would go. And that was part of the crazy. I truly felt crazy because I did not know where my money was. So clarity as opposed to vagueness is super, super important. So I started keeping my numbers religiously. And I also started to examine my perceptions. Like when I started to keep my numbers, I started to feel like I'm being controlled. I don't like this. I feel limited. Well, that's a lot of baggage around money that really didn't belong there because it's not limiting to track your money. It's responsible. I'm being a good steward of the money. And if I'm working for it, I want it to work for me. And I can't do that if I don't know what I'm spending. So, tracked my spending. I started putting things together in spreadsheets. And this process, like I started this around 2005. And at the time of this recording, it's 2024. So, this is almost 20 years ago. Um, I tracked my spending religiously for years and categorized things and like basic living expenses, housing, um, food out was a category I was blowing out of the water like back in the day, like spending like $700 to $800 on food out. That's where my money was going, spending on gifts. And the crazy thing is when I was spending like that, I would often not wind up prioritizing my own personal well-being, like putting off dental work or putting off doctor's appointments. Meanwhile, I would do these impulse buys on things that I really don't need. So the next step for me was to consolidate my debt. Now, for some people, this gets really serious where you have to go into a debt moratorium. And that means when you actually call your creditors and say, and it's covered in the book, it's really helpful. Um, how you would negotiate with banks or simply say, I'm requesting a debt moratorium. I do not have the money right now to make these bills. I do completely commit that I will be start paying in 3 or 4 or 5 months. And this is not a pleasant process. And yes, you are going to absolutely trash your credit because you spent money that is not yours and you're saying you can't pay it back. So, rightfully so. Thankfully, I never had to go into a debt moratorium with any of my creditors, but I did have to consolidate. So I got a 0% a card, and I did that dance for a few years to clear up my credit cards. So I got a 0% card with a very low transfer fee, and I transferred all my credit card debt onto that 0% card. So that way, the money that I was paying towards my credit card bills was going toward the bills. Because back when I was doing this, I was paying mostly interest in all my credit card bills. So that helped. And I would hop, skip, and jump every year or 2 years to another card with 0% interest. Whenever the first one would run out, I'd transfer everything over. So that way, my money that I was putting towards that debt was going to that debt and not to interest. Um, at the same time, I am regularly keeping my numbers. That did not change. I'm still to this day keeping numbers. I just have a different way of doing it. So back then, I was physically writing down all my numbers on a notebook. I was not using my debit card because my debit card would get me in trouble. And any of those credit cards that I got, those 0%, as soon as I got them, I cut them up. I cut them up immediately. I had no plastic in my wallet. And I don't think I had plastic in my wallet besides I did have a debit card for me to use to get cash out, but I was cash only for at least 5 years, cash and check only, which was super inconvenient. But I needed it because I needed to see the money go out of my hands. There's a different weight to money when you're shelling it out individually, like you're paying for things, than there is than just giving a card. Because I did not develop the skills at that moment to keep numbers regularly if I was using cards, right? So for a while, I was cash and check basis only, and I was writing down every single thing I spent, and I was keeping tracks of everything in a spreadsheet. So that did not change. Then magical things started to happen. I really believe that when you start to show up and you be a good steward and you put out there to whatever you choose to believe, God, the universe, whatever, um, the universe will rise to meet you and help you, right? If you start showing that you're doing your end, you're bringing the shovel, that things will rise to meet you. So some wonderful things happen. Some not so wonderful things happen too. But that house that I killed the equity out of, well, you know what happened in 2008. Like we hit that housing bubble, crashed. And at the time when I kept taking out those home equity loans, my little house that I got for 129 or $28,000, the value went up to 225, and the equity went up. Then I kept taking that equity out. Well, when the housing bubble crashed, I couldn't sell that house, and it was a painful, painful lesson. So, like many people, I had to short sell that house. And the negotiation that I had to make with that bank was that I was going to pay off a certain amount of money. And it was a no interest kind of loan, but over the course of 20 years, and I'm almost done with it now, I regularly been paying monthly an amount that the bank had dictated in order to release that house, so I no longer had to deal with it. Um, the next thing that happened was somewhere later on down the road, like I'm clearing up my credit cards, that credit card debt. And fast forward, something else that was amazing that happened is I did not realize that I qualified for public service loan forgiveness. And here are some of the crazy things about, my student loans. Like I had more than paid back my original loan. But because of the interest, I, more than 25 years later, still owed $50,000 of student loans. When I started looking into public service loan forgiveness, I had more than qualified for it. I had been in repayment for over 20 years, and I never defaulted. I never missed those payments. So those loans were finally forgiven. And then other wonderful things began to happen. Like I went from never thinking how I was going to ever be able to buy a house to being in a situation. And again, I really believe like when you show up and show that you're being a good steward, things will happen to you. Wonderful things will happen. It doesn't mean that you're not going to go through difficulty. We all go through challenges. But here's an amazing example of like wonderful things that just get placed in your life. We're buying the house that we were currently in. We only qualified for a certain amount. It wasn't a ton of money. The houses around us were going for, much higher. We were living in the house that we wanted to buy, and we had wonderful, wonderful landlords who were actually became friends, and we wanted to buy the house for them. And the house appraised at, let me think really quickly here where we're at. Okay, the house appraised for about $40,000 more, I want to say, $30,000 to $40,000 more than what we were approved for by the bank. And when we went back to the landlords, we were very honest with the landlords. We didn't want to do like a bidding game. Like, we respected them. We didn't want to play games. We were just putting our cards on the table and said, here's our paperwork. This is what we were approved for. And they had said, we would be happy if we got about, I'd say 20 to 30,000. It was 20 to 30,000 more than what we were approved for. And they said, we'd be happy with this number. And my husband and I looked at each other and we're like, we can't play games. We just have to be straight up and honest with them. We prayed about it, and my husband talked to our landlord and said, listen, here's our paperwork. This is what we're approved for. We didn't want to play any games with you. And our landlord at the time said, okay, so then that means you can do, and he put out a number that was actually $2,000 less than what we were approved for. And we were able to buy this house, and that's not something that we ever thought was possible. We had been shifting from rental to rental to rental to rental because we did not have the nest egg at that time or the money at that time. And I had put myself in so much debt. And when I had to short sell my little bachelorette pad, I could not go on the mortgage because my credit was destroyed. So this was something that his name would have to be able to carry the house. And, we were good stewards of our money. We cleared up all that stuff. I cleared up all that stuff. And we had the opportunity to buy this house that we're in, that we love.